The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me." He replied to him, "Friend, who appointed me as your judge and arbitrator?" Then he said to the crowd, "Take care to guard against all greed, for though one may be rich, one's life does not consist of possessions." Then he told them a parable. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. He asked himself, "What shall I do? For I do not have space to store my harvest." And he said, "This is what I shall do. I shall tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I shall store all my grain and other goods. And I shall say to myself, 'Now as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong? Thus will it be for the one who stores up treasure for himself, but is not rich in what matters to God.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Today we celebrate the feast of St. Isaac Jogues and St. John de Brebeuf and their companions. There were a number of companions to St. John de Brebeuf, St. Isaac Jogues. They were Jesuit priests. So Jesuits, if you know the story about the Jesuits used to be kind of like the Navy SEALs of the priesthood in the church. This amazing order founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola. Actually, when he founded the order of the Jesuits, their plan was to go to the Middle East and try to convert all of the Muslims living in the Holy Land. They knew that they would likely be martyred on the way there. I believe it was 8 men who took those initial vows. St. Ignatius of Loyola, St. Francis Xavier, and others. Very hardcore men giving their lives to God. And the Jesuits have an amazing history ever since then. They basically dedicated their lives to being the most skilled at whatever profession they were going to be a part of. So if they were going to get an education and be scientists or philosophers, they were going to be the greatest in the world. Many of the greatest scientists in world history were Jesuit priests, for example. Jesuits were also known for their great missionary efforts. Much of the reason why North and Central America is Christian today is because of the Jesuits. The Jesuits were some of the first missionaries to come to North America and Central America. And many of them were martyred and showed tremendous courage and bravery. This would include St. Isaac Jogues and St. John de Brebeuf. They went and ministered in what is now known as maybe like New York and Canada, and they evangelized many Native American tribes there. Both of their lives are great examples of courage. For example, St. Isaac Jogues famously was captured at one point, and the Native Americans actually cut off his 2 fingers on his hand because they thought that those 2 fingers, it's with those 2 fingers that the priest would bless. It's with those 2 fingers that they would hold up the Eucharist. And so they cut off his 2 fingers, thinking that that was where he got his priestly powers. And amazingly, he was able to escape, and he went back to France and ended up deciding to come back to North America and to continue to try to evangelize. And eventually he was martyred. Great example of courage on his part. St. John de Brebeuf is another great example of courage. He ministered amongst the Huron Indians for many years. And eventually he found out that the Iroquois tribe was on their way to take over the tribe of the Hurons. And John de Brebeuf had an opportunity to escape, but he refused to leave his people. And so he was captured, and he was essentially the ringleader in their imprisonment, and he endured very terrible tortures. One of the great things about the Jesuits in their modern histories is that when they went and they evangelized the Native Americans, they kept track of just about everything. They took very detailed records and diary entries of the things that happened. And so we're fortunate enough to have very detailed explanations of the lives they lived and also how they were martyred. St. John de Brebeuf, they gave him a nickname after they finally killed him. After many tortures, they called him Lionheart. And they actually ate his heart because they thought they would get some of his strength. So the example of these Jesuit martyrs is one of the great examples of courage and love in the history of our church. And I think one of the striking things about them is that there was not a whole lot of glory in their missions. I remember being struck when I was in high school. I was able to go and see the shrine to the North American martyrs, to John Day Brebeuf and Isaac Jogues, and there was nobody there. And I remember thinking how sad that was, that these amazing men had come to this land and evangelized. And even in their death, they are not very well known. In their lives were very much a life of the cross. They were Jesuit priests living amongst very superstitious and primitive peoples. And they wore their black robes. Whenever there was a famine or an illness that spread through the tribes, oftentimes they were the ones who were blamed. So they lived a very difficult missionary experience, not to mention the fact that they were trying to learn new languages and be able to explain the truths of the faith in different languages. It's very much a life of suffering, and it's something that should be an inspiration to us. In their life, even though it seemed like there was not a whole lot of glory in what they experienced, you and I, we have the great gift to be able to experience the fruit of what they brought about. We've seen the flourishing of Christianity in this part of the world, and most of that is indebted to men like John Day Brebeuf and St. Isaac Jogues. So we ask for their prayers today.